Join me on a journey of trying to build a bot to teach my homeschooled third grader. And in this video, I'm going to show you an overview of what I've got so far, about 4 or 5 months in, third week of school, just the components, how they're working together, and what I did to get this far. And from there, we're going to break this down in future videos, take a closer look at the exact architecture, how all the functions work, and my challenges and my goals for future development. Thanks for tuning in here to the first in a series of videos where I'm going to show you some of what I've experienced trying to build an AI homeschool assistant. My goal here was really to automate a lot of the teacher side of homeschooling. In my case, it's a third grade single homeschool student in the US. This year, I knew I was going to have more limitations in parent involvement, and I thought I could automate some of this, particularly because my son is very literate. He's a great reader. He can read anything you put in front of him. And so that was really why I was thinking in these terms of being able to give him the content in a text heavy format because I know he can do it. That is really the key point here that's allowed me to do this. And if he was not as literate, I don't think it would have worked. Now I'm only 3 weeks into this, but it's working pretty well. So with that in mind, I'm going to show you some of what I built here. In future videos, I'm going to get more into details so that if you're ambitious, you might be able to use some of what I did here. Long term, I think there's some opportunity to maybe commercialize some of this, although I haven't really thought too hard about how or what I would do. The current implementation of this is not going to work for commercialization because it's relying on platforms I can't really scale up. Um, I can't really syndicate this for multiple users, but that's something I'm thinking of down the line. So let me give you a little tour here what I have right now. And in the future, I'll get into some details, show you what I did, show you what worked and what didn't. So I wanted to allow my son a lot of freedom and a lot of sort of free range, but within a very structured format where he was getting used to the discipline of doing the same thing in the same way day after day, mainly because I don't want to micromanage him. I want him to just be able to do this without a lot of input from me. Now, that said, we work in the same room. I'm doing a full time job from home remotely. So I can help him when he has trouble, but I really can't do the traditional homeschool teacher where I'm in front of the board or I'm developing the lesson plan for the day. All of that is what is going on with the automation. And so I want him to have some of these values that are so important to us in the homeschool: free range, unschool. The last thing I wanted to do when I had new limitations imposed on me for third grade this year was resort to a system where he was going to sit in front of a screen and watch videos and be at the mercy of sort of a canned video heavy curriculum. I really didn't want that at all. And I thought I can do better than that. I can compress the academics down to a pretty small part of the day and free up the rest of the day for activities that are highly structured but that are active. That, he's out in nature, we live in the woods, I want to exploit that. We have a lot of things that he can interact with in the home. We have projects, I want to exploit that. So you're going to see a schedule here that looks very structured, and if I pull in the Google Calendar that a lot of this runs from, it looks very structured. Now, given that highly structured environment here, the amount of time that he's free to do his thing is pretty enormous throughout the day. So don't be fooled by the rigidity of what I've got here. We're very much into the free range and the unschool mindset. So that was driving my objectives for what is the homeschool trying to solve. Essentially, the homeschool is trying to solve the problem of me not being able to teach him, and in the process, I wanted to get into a system that could provide some coaching. Really, would be the dream, is that we have sort of a life coach running in this system that adapts and it understands what's going on. And I've started to really achieve some of that, which is pretty remarkable considering I've only been on this for probably not even 6 months. So where the student interacts here is in these areas: learn and explore. So learn are our academics. Explore is the less scripted part of the day, a big block of time in the afternoon where he's either going to do activities. He's got a range of activities he can choose from, or on days when we did a science class, he's got a science lab he's going to run in that slot. So if you look at the lesson from today, we're in the middle of some literature, and it's Alice in Wonderland. He's reading Alice in Wonderland, and what you see here was generated this morning by my prompt. So AI read a lesson plan for today, which was something that I scripted over the summer. I did 40 weeks of lesson plans, and really AI did 40 weeks of lesson plans, but it was a process for me to generate all of those 40 weeks worth of material. On any given day, the system's going to look down. What are my academics? You can see them here in red. It's math and English, and it's going to generate from my lesson plans today's student-facing content, which looks like this. So he's going back through a couple chapters, and he's got whatever the core concept is from the day, and he's got some writing to do. Now, in English this year, we're very writing focused. It was also a day for a spelling test. Now the parents got to administer the spelling test, and that's it. When he's done, if there was a written component, he's going to take a photo of the work that he did. He's going to submit that. It hasn't been done yet, or it would show here. I'm going to take you back to a previous one. You can see his writing. Now, this is the AI looking at the photo, trying to get a sense of what he wrote. It analyzed his writing, and it scored it on a rubric that I gave it, which is really simple, just breaking it into these 4 parts, and then it's going to grade his work. It grades very harshly, so I'm going to probably inflate his grades at the end. But I think if I was grading the work he did, I probably would have given him a 95, not an 85. But those are just some quirks and some details. Overall, I'm extremely happy at what it's doing, and you can see the lesson that it gave here, the student-facing lesson, is really great. So later videos, I'll tell you how I arrived at that. Let's move on to the Explore tab, which is where his activities are. So, for example, when it's a science lab, these go hand in hand with the science lessons, and I run these on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And it takes advantage of some of our resources living where we do. We've got acreage, we've got space, we've got nature, and so we can do activities that are related to that build on the lesson in science that day. And you can just see this is such cool stuff for him to do. It really goes beyond what you could get in some sort of off-the-shelf curriculum. And that was my key goal here: figure out what we're going to do to customize this, make it adaptable. And I'm pretty happy with what we've achieved here. Let's look at a couple of the other areas of the system here. Feedback. This is a place where he can register how he's feeling, and the system will log that and use that in its nightly analysis. He can talk about how he felt about the work. He can put some inputs in here if he wants to focus on some specific things. And if you look back at the page for the lesson, it has some of these same things. So at the top of the page here, if he's feeling, if he's tired, if he's ambivalent, he can register that. At the bottom of the page, he can feedback, and it's going to log what page he was on when he did this work, so it knows his feelings about this work pertain to this lesson in particular. Help is a chat area where we've got family members that we can write to. And then under the more section, one of the things I wanted to get better at was meal planning because that's a weakness of mine. And so I built a system here that's going to generate recipes for us and then slot them into days. And from this, it sends me a shopping list and it slots in the recipe into my calendar. You can see I got one in here for tomorrow. And into my event, it's going to put my ingredients list that it sent me a checklist for. And then it made that in the calendar so I can pull this up. Now they're just a summary. They're very cursory recipes, but I can feed this into AI again if I wanted to make, more elaborate recipe for me that breaks it down into steps, which I do occasionally if it's something unfamiliar. So that's a tour of, I'll show you my shopping list while I'm at it here. So you can see I went shopping last night and I got most of this according to what it made. So let's look at some of the back end stuff. Like I was saying, I think I use Glide as the front end. So Glide is this sort of a la carte interface construction kit that essentially just builds a front end for data. And the data in my case is Google Sheets because I wanted to make it very accessible for me to interact with the database. And I didn't want to have to go into something like a SQL database. I wanted it to be Sheets because I can navigate it pretty easily. It's not going to scale up very well. So if I add more students at some point or try to make a commercial software out of this, that's going to have to change. But for my purposes right now, it's great to be able to interact with the data in Sheets. And so Glide is really just giving you a tool for student to see the data and change the data in whatever way I want to design, which wasn't really a natural thing for me to get into, but I figured it out. It took some time, and the LLMs that I was using to design this were enormously helpful for me to figure out what to do to make it behave the way I wanted. Zapier is sort of the engine behind all this that makes the thing feel like a bot. And I wouldn't have built it this way if the replies that I was getting to my prompts hadn't suggested it. When I was first building this, it was Claude. It was the LLM that I was doing that development process with, and it made the suggestion that what I wanted was Zapier plus Glide and then some kind of database like Sheets, and I just went with that. It turned out to be a great solution. So what the system does on the back end runs from Zapier. And you can see here I have one action that daily makes the lessons. I have another one that makes the afternoon activities. Then there's a processor that runs and does some analysis on the work that the student does every day and other environmental factors. And it just tries to analyze that and make a log of it overnight. And then that compiles on itself daily, looks back at the previous day and looks at what happened this day, and it has this running log of what the student did that's sort of just for its own benefit. Lesson archival is just a thing that completes the lessons every day. Assess is looking at scores and looking at his writing. And then the meal planner, this is just the automation that takes those recipes and does the work to put them on the calendar and send me the shopping list, etc. If we get into one of these, you can see, for example, let's use the lesson generator. So this was probably the bulk of the development, was figuring out how all these were going to work. And you can see there's a schedule, and it goes and gets that nightly context. It looks at what the courses are on the calendar, runs some code to get rid of all the stuff that's not the courses, and then it decides, all right, these are my courses today. Let me go into the sheet and figure out what the lesson plan says, and then I'm going to send that to Claude. And I picked Claude for this because I like the way it talks to the student. I like the language it uses. I didn't feel like I needed to put any guardrails on Claude to get it to talk to my 8-year-old like it's a teacher in a third grade class. It was very successful at that. I'm using all the LLMs in various places here. I've done a lot of work with Gemini to develop the content. I'm developing a new version of the activity generator with ChatGPT. You can see Grok is doing the images here. So it's going to spit out the lesson plan that the student views. So that's this, right? This is, I didn't write any of this. I didn't style it. I didn't create the CSS that puts the colors in. It chooses all that, the emojis, et cetera, et cetera. It's generating all of that for me, and I think it's very successful. So once it does that, it gets a thumbnail and it makes a row, and that's what Glide is receiving and displaying to the student. So there's some other stuff that runs in here, and then there are frequently 2 classes a day, so it's got to run both of those. So overall, I'm super happy with how this works, and I think before we conclude, I'll just show you the database. So everything here begins with the curriculum, and I've got a lot of rows that are the different subjects. And essentially, you've got a 1-paragraph lesson plan here. Now, this is a lot like how a teacher would operate. The teacher's working off a lesson plan that's pretty short and sweet. The real beauty of this is that it's able to expand on that into the student-facing lesson through that lesson generator action that I just showed you in the Zapier Zap, as they call it. So there's a lot of data here along with it that is maybe not used in all the subjects. But if I go down to social studies, for example, there's a lot in here about how to assess the student. Is it a quiz that he's going to take? Are there videos that go along with it? So you can see in my science lessons here, it'll embed videos. For example, here, there's a video here on life cycles, and not all of them use all of these columns, but I've filled it out in such a way that I think it has what we need in courses like social studies. For example, there is no textbook. There's none of that, right? This it's all self-contained. So if we have things like this, and you'll see from looking through here, my curriculum's very classical. Was one of my personal values that I wanted to not completely get rid of some of the more modern, trendy types of content and curricula, but I wanted this to be sort of old school in what he was learning. And because of that, in English, we're using some classic kid lit, Alice in Wonderland, Wind in the Willows. When it gets to social studies, it's very classical. It's focused on the Greeks. It's focused on American history, and that was a very deliberate choice on my part, mainly because I don't like much of what I am getting out of the curricula that are out there. Now, the last couple years, we used Oak Meadow curriculum, which is wonderful, but would never adapt to what I'm trying to build here. I went out and tried to find some other free curriculum for classroom teachers. I did use that to inform the curriculum that I made, which, like I said, I did with Gemini. And if I look back here, you can see inside some of my projects where I built the curriculum, I gave it a lot of texts, right? So I would start from giving it example teacher lesson plans and say, we're going to build something that looks like this. And then I would run these research prompts that would develop this into various stages. So if I look at this, You can see in this segment, it was trying to lay out a syllabus for the year, and then it actually got into generating some example rows. Based on this, I would tell it, all right, this is good, this is bad, let's keep going. And so that was a pretty painstaking process that I'm going to have to try to streamline for next year. But in the end, it worked. And you can see that I have an awful lot of content here. And this is what it looks at every week. You can see where we are right now. We're not too far along. We're only here on lesson 10. That's what ran today. And then it's going to change, and it's going to look up from the bottom and say, I'm looking for an English course that says ready. This will be my next one, number 11, when that runs again on Wednesday. Subsequent videos, I'm going to get more into the details here on exactly how I built these things, what I started with, what I changed, what's working, what's not. Like I said, I'm going to probably try to upgrade my activity generator. If you look at my activities, they're pretty good. I'm trying to give the kid a menu of things that he can do in the afternoon in his free time, right? And so I gave it a lot of data, and I said, here's, that's not it, it's this one. And I said, here are the categories of things I want you to pick from. Now, it's pretty good at this, but it's getting into ruts a little bit too much. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that I'm sending it these big walls of text. So I'm going to try to make this feel a little bit more alive instead of the static sort of data repository that I have now. That is the project for maybe the next month, is to try to make this a little bit more intelligent and rely more on LLMs. I think I'm going to use a GPT assistant model to do this. So wish me luck. I'm going to be documenting that as I get through it. And if you got any questions, let me know. If you're ambitious, you want to try something like this, I'll try to answer questions for you. But stay tuned for subsequent videos. I think we'll probably flesh this out if you're interested in trying to do something similar.